kind of just want to say, like, if Nikki Haley loses in New Hampshire and all that's left is Donald Trump, this will be the fastest non-incumbent Republican primary in the modern history.
Yeah.
It'll be the fastest. Donald Trump would have been anointed without competition. It will not have to go to a national primary. If Nikki Haley loses New Hampshire, it's done. Trump will be the nominee. And we all have to reckon with that and deal with that. And Republicans need to soul search a lot, because there are a lot of Republicans who don't want Trump. And they're going to need to think what direction they want this country to go in. And it's going to be a hard decision for them.
It is. It does seem like a very unique circumstance as far as modern history to have this lame duck president who just lost the last general election like pretty handily.
Oh, yeah.
And is being handed the opportunity to do so again pretty much without competition.
No, pretty much without competition. That's what shocks me so much. Like, none of them went hard enough when they should have, right? Nikki Haley should have came out of the gate and said Trump is a deranged lunatic coward who, is going to be arrested and is delusional and can't form. She should have come out of the gate with that.
I don't know, because Chris Christie came out of the gate with that, right?
Well, but he was doing well in New Hampshire. So if she loses New Hampshire, I blame her not going hard enough. And look at DeSantis. DeSantis tried the pussyfooting. DeSantis tried the out Trump. And DeSantis, tried to play nice, and he couldn't.
Sure.
You can't play nice with him. I think the only way to beat Trump is to go lower, embarrass him.
I don't know within this Republican electorate, though. I don't know if there was a way around it. I feel like he just marshaled support so well because of the personal connection that people felt.
Think there was no way to beat Trump this cycle. It was just going to be him.
I can't imagine, like, I'm trying to think, was there another candidate? I don't think that the strategy that Haley or DeSantis, for example, could have taken, if it were very different, would have actually changed the outcome. Yeah.
And so then where does that leave the Republican Party? Is the Republican Party just locked to Trump for the foreseeable future? I mean, what happens in 2028? What happens in the next midterm elections? Like, where does this leave a party if everyone is kind of bought into the delusion? Or, like, the voters are bought into the delusion, but the elected officials really aren't.
Yeah.
These elected officials like Kevin McCarthy and all these other guys, Mike Johnson, they all know the truth.
Yes, I think it slowly but surely reverts back to what it was. I think without him as a figurehead, the far right that embodies Trumpism, the Matt Gaetz, the House Freedom Caucus, they will stay. They will keep their message strong, but they're not going to completely dominate the party. They're not going to have as much power over the House as they once did, because right now Trump has all this power because he can destroy Republican candidates or Republican politicians with his tweets or with what he says. And that is going to slowly go away if he loses. If he wins, buys another 10 years of this.
I think it might be... Do you mean win the primary or win the presidency?
Win the presidency.
I think Trump might have that power for as long as he's alive.
Maybe.
I think, but the numbers will just diminish over time. I just don't know if the Republican Party stays nationally relevant if Trump can send out a tweet and sink 20% support for the national figurehead for the president. Right? If we see these exit polls come out in New Hampshire tonight, we saw the exit polls come out of Iowa, right, where 20% of Iowa primary voters would not vote for Donald Trump. We also saw 30% of Iowa voters would not vote for Nikki Haley. So what does that mean? It almost means that Donald Trump is their best bet, because the Republicans, who are the base of the Republican Party, won't rally around the establishment. They don't want to revert, and they're going to fight back from that reverting.
I think this depends on two things. One, the results of his trials. If he is convicted, that martyrs him further.
I agree.
And support for this idea of the man will continue for longer. If not, and he just loses the election, then it's going to whittle away more and more, because this spike that we've seen to draw him away from DeSantis in the first place
was the indictments.
Exactly.
Right.
It was the indictments, and that energy for the Republican base is going to wear off. And then you're going to have more Republican voters that are nearer to the margins, that care less about the man of Trump, the personality, the cult of personality, and who care more about issues and more about Republicans winning. And
Yeah.
they're going to start to say, we need, like, especially with a second loss in a row in the presidential election.
Absolutely.
They're going to be, especially to Joe Biden,
Right.
who they see as so weak.
Right. What does it say about Donald Trump, who thinks Joe Biden is so weak that he lost to him and then might lose to him again, right? Doesn't that make you twice as weak?
It would make you twice as weak if
You believe that you actually lost.
Exactly.
Which, he does not
maintains
proclaim
that he does not.
right publicly.
Yeah.
I just think it's just going to be a very interesting election. We see a lot of people going into the polls in New Hampshire, and this one old woman who they interviewed, they asked her, like, why are you voting today? And she's like, well, I'm a registered Republican. I voted for Trump in 2016, but I'm voting for Nikki Haley. And they're like, why are you voting for Nikki Haley today? And she's like, because I grew up in a constitutional democracy and I want to remain in a constitutional democracy, and I want constitutional democracy for my children. And then she goes on and on about how my father fought in World War II to defeat the fascists, and I'm not going to let him win. Based old woman.
Yeah.
God, that is the type of American spirit I want everyone to have going into the voting booth. Because at the end of the day, we can totally disagree on policy. Like, I don't agree with Liz Cheney on anything. But when Liz Cheney makes the point, she's like, I disagree with Joe Biden on a lot of stuff, but we can have arguments about the size of the child tax credit, how we do border policy, what the corporate tax rate is. We can't have disagreements on a dictatorial leader. We can't have somebody come out and say that he wants to get rid of term limits. As Trump has said, he has said so many times that he jokes about how he's going to be in office and then for 4 more years and then maybe longer, right? So he says exactly what he wants. You just got to believe him.
Yeah, and it's frustrating that in right-wing media specifically, it's not portrayed as that kind of a threat, despite him saying that, despite there being a whole plan out called Project 2025, which we're going to do a deep dive on sooner rather than later, which is from the Heritage Foundation, I think, which is a plan to consolidate executive branch power by ousting kind of the lifelong bureaucrats who have been there. When these ideas are all out there, when they're all public and they're not covered, or they're not covered as super threatening. Mm-hmm. They're not covered as threatening compared to the crisis at our border.
Right.
And that's where people are confused. That's where people start to think our country has gone to shit and we need someone else. We need someone like Trump to shake things up and bring us out of it, rather than our country is actually doing pretty okay.
Right.
Our country relatively is doing pretty well, and Trump is the one thing that could send us into chaos and into dictatorship, which is something that is the most fundamental value we have.
And he goes on these speeches and rants praising Viktor Orban, the prime minister of Hungary, praising the strong man. And he says America needs a strong man. He said that out loud. He's like, sometimes you need a strong man. Like, how much louder do you need the dog whistle to be before your ears start bleeding and you finally get it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just important that we take that type of energy going into the voting year of 2024. Whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, it doesn't really matter. What you have to be is for the liberal values that made America. Thomas Jefferson would be rolling in his grave if he knew that half of the country was voting for a strong man like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
All right.